Hello, it's Anna and Sophie from Soundyard here. We make Chris Skinner's Countryside podcast, and we've got something very exciting to share with you. We have a new service that's being launched, and it's called Spoken Stories.
Spoken Stories is all about recording the voices and memories of your loved ones in outstanding quality, so they can be enjoyed for generations to come. For example, you know the story that Grandma tells that everyone in the family has heard before. Well, Spoken Stories is about getting those stories down and preserving them for your family history. Spoken Stories is about gifting someone the time to capture these personalities and unique voices.
We record your loved ones' tales, whether it's their whole life story so far or something more specific like a life-changing event. It is a gorgeous experience, and what you're left with is a beautiful monologue that really captures the essence of that person.
Think of it like an audio portrait, and take a listen to a snippet of this one from Diane's spoken story, recorded in her beautiful garden.
I was born in 1951 at Newmarket, and unfortunately I didn't see Mum for a year. I was looked after by a lovely nurse called Diane, my name, because my mum had TB when I was born. And so my mother never worked because with her problem with her, lungs, she had to go and have it sort of pumped up every so often. She used to do a lot of dressmaking, so she always made our clothes years ago. But yeah, she was a lovely mum, yeah, and Dad as well, yeah. That's very nice childhood I had, yeah, very nice. Yeah. I got married February the 16th, 1974. The weather was gorgeous. I ended up having to put on a big sort of T-shirt under my wedding dress I didn't need. I had a lovely one of those transparent umbrellas in case it rained, and it was just a beautiful day. I think I'm always sort of quite cheerful. I mean, if I go down the Luke and deliver some eggs to somebody, I'll meet somebody and chat, and then Paul say, "Where have you been?" I said, "I've been chatting to people." That's just my way. That's just how I am. We've always lived here. We had this built in 1974. They put the footings down in February and we moved in the August. Years ago, I used to go around the village on a bike, and when I had Ian, he'd sit on the back. We live in a lovely area. We've got lovely neighbours. They help us all out, which you all do with neighbours, and that's very, very nice. And as I said to Paul, I'm hoping we can keep this place on until, well, I don't want to move from here until I go out in a brown box. I hope that's not too soon.
If you'd like more information about Spoken Stories and to take advantage of our special introductory offer, you can head to www.soundyard.org/spoken stories.
And keep listening after this episode with Chris, and you'll hear another example of a spoken story. It's a view of the world from a 6-year-old.
What a way to start the Countryside podcast this week. We're in Chris Skinner's farm van here and looking through an open window. A lovely sight there.
Matthew, this young lady hatched 10 young ducklings off Saturday evening, so they're about 4 or 5 days old. She's still got 10, which is quite amazing. And this year, many of our ground nesting birds have done a second brood just because of the appalling weather in March and April and in the beginning of May. And most of them lost their broods. They either got waterlogged out or they just had to give up. It was continuous rain. And this mum, the mallard, she's a female mallard, so she's a wild duck. And she's just brought the chicks, the ducklings, up onto my lawn. 10 of them.
They're very small, aren't they? Not much bigger than a tennis ball.
Well, the eggs are half the size of a tennis. They're not much bigger than a large ping pong ball. So the little ducklings are very vulnerable. They are spending a lot of time on the duck pond, feasting on any flying insects about, and they dart across the water. They're very vulnerable to predation, though. Magpies will have them. Lesser blackback gulls and herring gulls will also have a go at them. And she's a ferocious mum. And you can see she's just keeping them completely close to her body.
Standing guard there, isn't she? But they are terrific, really lovely little birds, aren't they? And I wonder how many of them will grow up. I mean, I hate to be morbid about these things, but she has 10 for a reason.
Yes, she does. And you can see the colour on her plumage. It's not like the male, the Drake mallard, with the gaudy green head and the sort of wing coverts as well. She's very demure because she has to incubate the eggs on the ground. She can't be seen, so she'll use a tussock of grass, perhaps 14, 15 eggs, and she'll stay on the eggs after they've hatched, or when they hatch, I should say, for about an extra 24 hours to give any late arrivals a chance to come out of the eggs. Because remember, she doesn't lay 10 or 14 eggs in one batch. It's over a 2-week period, so she doesn't start incubating them until she's finished laying, and then hopefully they all hatch simultaneously. But very vulnerable because this time of the year they've only got this down on them. They haven't got any proper feathers, so they have to be feathered up before we get into the cold weather in November. So that's why they're eating greedily on my grass. There's some special chick crumb food out there for them. I feel very honoured actually that she trusts me and brings them up here 3 or 4 times a day, and it's just wonderful to see the parental care. We often don't see these things because many people today are detached from actually watching wildlife, and when you have the opportunity to do what I do, I'm just in awe of the parental responsibility and care that they take.
Here they are. Here they are. Look.
Just feet from the car now. You're so spoilt, and she's so trusting as well. There we are. A lovely way to start the podcast. She's a quarry species, and we're now off on a short drive just off the edge of High Ash Farm for another quarry species. So, I see I've already given you a high-vis jacket. I've got one on the front of the truck as well, ready to put on. So without further ado, I'm going to start the truck. We've got a short journey, and then I hope we'll have a sight to remember.
Chris Skinner's Countryside Podcast with Matthew Gudgeon.
Well, we've driven not much more than a mile on from Chris's farm just south of Norwich to another location very nearby. And Chris, we're down in a quarry.
Yes, I said we were going to be looking at a quarry species, and it's a bit of a pun. It's a Norfolk joke, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it's very good. I didn't believe we were actually going to visit a quarry. This looks like a sand quarry here.
It is a quarry. It's now finished. It's deceased. It's right by the A140, and I've been coming here for the best part of 10 years, watching one of my favourite birds of all. It's called Riparia riparia, and if you look riparian up in the dictionary, it just means riverbank. And this bird is the riverbank bird. It's the sand martin, and it loves sandy cliffs, and because of all the excavation that happened around the edge of this quarry, we're sort of 20 feet on more beneath ground level where we're sitting. There's best part of 50 holes there. Give you an idea of the size of them, about 2-inch diameter. I don't think it could quite fit a cricket ball in each hole, and the holes go into the sand about 2 feet, and they slightly slope upwards for drainage.
And they look like an oval shape, really, aren't they?
Yes, they are, and but we're sitting there waiting for some birds to arrive. And normally sand martin nest sites, which is what this is a hive of activity, is the best way to describe it. and there's none there. But there's a clue. And just beneath that little long row of nest holes in the sand, no, that's over there, you can see a squiggle. Can you? It looks like a little dark line. And what's happened, every nest has been predated by a grass snake. And grass snakes, I've watched it time and time again, trying to come down from above to get into the holes, and it falls every time, and it's learnt to curl its body up in an S shape and crawl upwards, put its head near the entrance of a hole, sniffs. If there's anything in there, it will go in, and then it comes out of one hole, still with its tail in the hole, and goes down the next one and gorges on the young sand martins. And of course, it's petrified the parents. And basically, they attempted this year's first brood. They've given it all up, not through all the heavy rain that we've had, just through the attentions of this single grass snake. Now, grass snakes are protected. The sand martins are protected as well. You mustn't interfere with nesting birds. So I've had to leave it alone, and all the quarry workers have been questioning me why there's no sand martins there this year. But I've got 2 strings to my bow, Gudgeon, and
at least
right in the middle, the 2 quarries here at Caister St Edmund. It's the river valley that the sand martins love, and on the other side of the river valley, right on the northern boundary of a Hirsch farm, is another quarry, and that's where we're going to go, because the sand martins have deserted this. Birds, of course, are very mobile, and they've got the choice of doing this, and they're set up in the adjacent quarry. But you can see there's not a single bird here, and this is peak nesting time for them, coming up for the middle of July. Nothing.
It's incredible the snake has managed to get up that sheer
face. It curls itself up into an S shape. So it's kind of the little grains of sand fall away, and it manages to get to the first nest hole. Once it does that, it uses its little tongue that comes out, and I've watched it carefully where we're sitting with high-powered pair of binoculars, which we'll use in a minute at the other quarry. They're on the front of the truck here, and you can actually see it sniffing the air to see if each hole is occupied, and it's eliminated the whole lot. Just one snake has done, what can you count? You can count at least 50 sand burrows there. There's 2 little separate sites that we're facing. So, fascinating story, but come on, let's start the truck up.
I want to see a sand martin now.
Exactly. And I'll explain what we're seeing when we get there. Right, off we go. It's only a short distance, about a mile, and we should, fingers crossed, it's always a dangerous thing to promise something when you're looking at nature, but fingers crossed we'll come across some. Here we go.
Well, this is a working quarry, and we haven't come very far, and we're in a huge, great depression in the ground, man-made, with lots of yellow sand all around us.
Yes, tens of thousands of tons of sand, Matthew.
How deep down are we here?
We are about 100 feet, 30 metres beneath ground level, and we're looking at an enormous cliff face here, and you can see there's been some landslips because of all the recent rain that we've had. The sand has become saturated, and that's all right. We're sitting parked in the car in a safe area. Oh, there you are. Look, a sand martin just flew out in front of us.
Oh,
Matthew.
There we are, yes.
In front of us are around 50 to 60 nest holes near the summit of this sand cliff. It's quite stable sand just there. It's not fallen down, and we've got sand martins flying around us now. And what they do is they'll go off. There's young in the nest holes at the moment, 2, 3 and 4 in each nest hole, and the parents go off en masse. They're gregarious birds. They love feeding together. Obviously in front of us they love nesting together as well, and they're, I suppose, the odd ones out of the 3 hirundine birds which you'll see, which are swallows, house martins and sand martins. Swifts should be really included. They're not related to those other 3 species. Now, we all see lots of house martins if you're lucky, and lots of swallows. They tend to nest in and amongst human habitation. But the third one of that trio, the sand martin, riparia, I love the Latin name, the river bird, is very different in its habits and where it nests. It nests generally away from people. It will use cliffs, it will use old quarries, and sometimes in strange places as well where soil's been dumped in the past and you have a vertical surface. And other birds will try and predate them as well. We mentioned the grass snake earlier at the other quarry, and so they've forsaken that site and started a brand new nest colony right in front of us at the top of this cliff. We couldn't climb up there, it's just too steep and too slippery, so they're safe from human interference.
And then they're about 6 feet, a little bit more than that maybe, from the rim of the quarry here, and it's perforated side of the hillside. And it looks a little different from the last place. I think that you said it's a little bit more stable, that soil, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's quite hard. It's compacted over the years, and the sides of the quarry have been dug away for gravel extraction. And then underneath us, the next layer down is a chalk layer, and that's over 100 feet deep. So the quarry goes down in 2 stages. The first one's for what they call the overburden, which contains all the minerals, things like the flints and the sand of different grades, and that's used for house building and road building. And then later on the chalk's excavated for neutralising acidic conditions in agricultural soil. And it's a bit quiet at the moment at the nest colony because they're all off feeding, and they feed over the fields immediately behind us, which are the northern fields at High Asham, looking for insects. They spend a lot of time flying up and down the River Tass, hence the riparian part of their name, the river bird, and that's where you get lots of insects in the cool weather, which we've been having this summer. So it's a bit of a torrid summer for them, and this will be their first brood if they bring them off, and it's very late now because about the first birds to arrive of that trio, swallows, house martins and the sand martins. They're the first to arrive, sometimes late February, and I'll see little flocks of them darting round on the farm. Now, they're small birds, Matthew, and I mean small. We can all visualise a swallow with the long tail streamers. You have 2 sand martins equals 1 swallow. So a kilo of swallows is about 36 birds. A kilo of sand martins would be about 75 birds in one hand, and a bag of sugar in the other, to give you an idea.
And yet in flight...
Yeah, one just went in.
There we are.
Out again, feeding
in flight, they look very similar to swallows.
Yes, they do. They're creamy white underneath, but they are different, complete. The plumage is very different. No tail streamer. That's the first thing, like you would have on the swallow. And the next one is no blue on the plumage, in that iridescent blue that swallows and house martins, kind of gunmetal blue, very beautiful. They don't have that. The backs on a sand martin are brown in colour, and underneath they have a very distinctive brown chin strap going right across the chest. Now, that bird just arrived and went out to the hole and just fed the babies, which would be near the entrance to the hole, and was gone in about 3 or 4 seconds, and that's typical. Gone off for another load of food. But what I'd love to do is to sit here. About every half an hour, the flock comes back and they all feed simultaneously. They're really lovely birds to watch, and they're playful as well. They come here in the spring, first part of the year, and one will have a feather on this big sand cliff face, and it will drop the feather, and then another one will come and pick it up, and they have what we call feather games. It's just lovely to see, and that's why I've fallen in love with them, because they come all the way up from Africa. They'll leave shortly after they've brought this brood off. They're pretty quick at leaving the UK. They'll fly down over the Channel, right down the western coast of France, along the Bay of Biscay, across the Mediterranean, down through Spain, Tunisia, They'd cross down the edge of the Sahara Desert usually, and then overwinter just south of the Sahara Desert, an area called the Sahel, and it is really hostile there. There's been some droughts there, and in the mid-1960s we lost over 2/3 of our house martins and whitethroats as well, because of the Sahara's actually spreading southwards as well as northwards. That area of desertification is becoming much larger. We don't know all the reasons that's happened. One's just come out. There it goes, flitting straight off across the top of us. But they're high up, 70, 80 feet above us, and we're kind of craning our heads looking out of the windscreen of the truck so we don't disturb them.
And hopefully grass snake proof.
I hope so. There you can see this huge sort of wall of sand is crumbled away in places, but the area that they've chosen, they're clever birds. Once one starts pecking to make a hole, the whole lot start at the same time, and they kind of work as a team. I love it. And they're beautiful tiny little birds. One's just gone in. Just count the seconds. If there's babies in there, it will feed them quickly, maybe take some poo out, and then there it goes, gone.
10 seconds.
Yeah, 10 seconds. Feed your children. That's about all I did with mine. 10 seconds, that was quite enough.
The model father. Wonderful to see these diminutive birds, and you have to look carefully, but I think you will notice in flight that they are smaller than swallows, and they're very precious. And sadly, the areas where they can nest, not just because of grass snakes, mainly because of us, are vanishingly few, aren't they?
Yes, Matthew, it's one of the delights of the nature that we share our planet with, and the more you can study them, the more you learn about them, you realise how vulnerable they are compared to how we treat the world, and that's why I respect and love them.
Well, here we are in this sand pit.
Yeah, it's a quarry. I said we were doing quarry species. Have you forgotten my best joke?
No, I never forget your jokes. But where's the bucket and spade? I was rather hoping I'd be able to...
Yes, you haven't got your knotted handkerchief on the top of your head yet, so... Anyway, a real treat for you, and then we've got one more treat back at the farm. It's only a couple of minutes in the car, and we'll be back again. One's just gone in and out. Oh, wonderful. You are spoilt.
Back on home turf for Chris now. This is High Ash Farm, and one of the wide, broad walkways here, the avenues of wildlife, which Chris specialises on at High Ash. And some beautiful colour as well, the blues and the reds of the wild flowers. And you've, of course, remembered now, we've remembered, haven't we, to take our high vis off, because
yes.
You've always been a bit critical of me for ever wearing bright clothing.
Yes, exactly. If you want to be a walking scarecrow at High Ash Farm, you wear bright red, or in our case we were just wearing the high vis sort of fluorescent yellow. I thought we both looked quite fetching as we visited the two quarries each side of High Ash Farm.
Almost handsome, really.
Oh, I'd have thought so, yes. Yeah, we should have had a picture, really, just to prove it. But this is really worth a picture in front of us, Matthew. We're on one of the old Roman roads that run right from west to east across High Ash Farm. It's wide. It's, about 20 metres wide from one side to the other. And all down one edge is a grass verge, and it's allowed to grow with wildflowers. There's teasels there, the pink in the background. I hear a lot of hissing now. It's Himalayan balsam, which is doing really well after this wet summer. And then in front of us is plant which is a perennial. It's 6 to 7 feet tall, and it's a beautiful, beautiful blue, daisy-like flowers. Let's go up and have a close look. They're stunningly beautiful, and it's called chicory. It's really beautiful. It's a daisy-like flower, and it's kind of almost a pastel, almost a Wedgwood blue, I suppose you'd call it. And in the past, it used to be grown early gardeners, right back in the 16 and 1700s, learnt to force it, rather like you can force rhubarb and get the blanched stems coming up if it's not exposed to light. So people used to grow chicory in their cellars or in upside down garden pots and eat the kind of little vegetable portion at the bottom before it comes up and forms this tall plant, and it was called succory back then.
So is this the same stuff they used to make Sat's coffee from?
Exactly. There was my mum used to buy a bottle of this coffee every week, and I can visualise the picture on the front of it, and it's camp coffee with chicory. And the chicory is very bitter, so you can use these leaves without cooking them all the way up the stalks here. There's these lush green lance-shaped leaves, and they're bitter, and you can actually add it to salads to kind of add a little bit of bite to it. And that's what happened with the chicory roots. They were ground and dried, and people actually grew it as a crop and then sold it to be included into camp coffee. And sometimes people even use chicory as a coffee substitute without all the expense of importing the coffee itself.
I think in wartime that was particularly the case, wasn't it?
Absolutely. But this is a long flowering plant. You can see all these little buds at the top here, and it's a great favourite with bees and butterflies. Well, it's a bit of a lacking butterfly year so far, but just as we arrived, we had a couple of meadow browns fly past us, and there was also a large white just buzzing past us, looking up and down. Oh, bumblebee on the Himalayan balsam just behind there, policeman's helmet there, just flown from one to the other. Very popular. Now, it's very tempting when you're walking along, going past huge displays of these glorious plants to I just like looking and foraging in the undergrowth a little bit. If we walk down here, this will interest you. Look, part the grass for you a little bit.
I think I know what that is. In miniature.
In miniature.
To something I've just seen in the supermarket when I did my weekly shop.
Yes. Well, it's Wimbledon time, isn't it? And so we got to talk about strawberries. And this is the impossible one. Oh, the sun's just come out on it. This is pink. It's not quite ready to eat. It's wild strawberry. And quite a famous plant as well, because William Morris, who did lots of sort of wallpaper designs, and he was a brilliant chap, and later on he did prints as well, and he was in a castle somewhere, and he was watching some thrushes, and they were going down into the edge of the garden stealing the berries from the wild strawberries, and he rushed into the castle and he drew one of the world's most famous designs. It's called the Thieving Thrush, and it was in my hall at High Ash Farm, in High Ash House, and I had the whole hallway, which is really tall. It split the house in half, 2 equal halves, and the wallpaper on the wall was of the thieving thrushes, so I'll never forget it. And it's really beautiful little miniature plant, and these tiny little fruits on them with the seeds on the outsides of the fruits. So if we walk along a little bit.
Much smaller than the cultivated version.
Yes, and the flavour is meant to be really intense, but remember the weather this year. With the last couple of months we've had virtually no sun, and strawberries, to be at their best, need lots of warm sun on them, and it kind of makes those tiny little miniature berries, which are very hard and unappetising at the moment, into luscious little treats that you can have. We might see some more. You have to kind of look along carefully. Yep, there's a molehill here, and there's one right on the edge of it here. Anything on there? Not really. No, another sort of half. It's quite a common plant, but because it's so diminutive, you have a job to see them sometimes. You look down in the grass. Anything along here? No, I think that's about it, I think.
On the way up you saw a rarity though, didn't you, alongside your wildflower meadow?
Yes, it was a mallow. Here, look here.
Oh, there's more strawberries.
This is better. This is nearly edible, this one. Yeah, it's still half white, so not really. I don't think we should be tempted to have that one. Oh, one in flower here. they're the typical strawberry flowers that you will see. And if I put my fingers around the plant a little bit, you might see what happens at this time of the year. Yep, here we go. This is a runner. And it sends out these long runners, which happens if anybody grows strawberries in their garden, the cultivated ones. You get these long little shoots coming. Here's one, a long one. Normally it's got a little plant on the end of that, and this one hasn't. But there we are. It's a real treat, and in flower as well. Diminutive little white flowers, only about 1/4 inch across, with 5 petals on. There we are, and some more young baby strawberries to come just there. Perfect. Yeah, so there we are. That's a little treat. If you be like a lot of farmers, walk along looking at the ground, sort of cursing at the weather, this is something that's easy to miss. Here's a runner. There we go. Going along there underneath the foliage. So really beautiful. Easy to miss. Any more down there?
So these are the strawberries. Where's the cream?
Exactly that. Well, you know what farmers are like. Yes, I'm a bread and cheese man, and only just at that. So we've got one more job to do, Matthew. Let's go back to the truck, and we've got burgeoning file of questions to answer from our Countryside podcast listeners.
The ducks at High Ash Farm going in to roost for an evening. Hey everyone, it's Matthew here, and if you've been enjoying our Countryside podcasts, we've got a small favour to ask.
Yes, Matthew. What we're going to do is to ask for a small donation to help run the podcast, and any surplus goes for conservation at High Ash Farm here. And so it's really important. We both love to keep the podcast going, and that duck agrees with me, I think.
Well, it's straightforward to donate. You can make a one-off donation or set up a small monthly contribution, and the address is highashfarm.com/podcast.
We're hugely grateful for any support. It means we can keep sharing the stories of the countryside, which I love doing each week, but it's that small amount of costs we need to cover. So thank you very much in advance.
Well, the Q&A session we really enjoy each week, and we're doing it inside the van because simply outside it's a bit breezy and the emails will blow all over the place, won't they?
Yes. Yep.
And here's one from Ingrid Bain, who describes herself as a very avid listener from Cambridgeshire. I was walking in my normal wildlife glebe, an area dedicated to nature with many wildflowers, grasses and an assortment of trees native to Britain, with plenty of hedges producing sloes, rosehips, blackberries. It attracts large flocks of birds, especially the overwintering thrushes from Scandinavian. The glebe is surrounded by farmland and attracts wildlife such as roe deer, badgers and 12 species of butterfly. Although I've only seen 5 this summer. They now have honeybees in several hives, and last week I came across this strange white mass which looked possibly like eggs on one of the paths cut through the wildflowers. The majority being mostly oxeye daisies. They've got quite a few common wild orchids there this year as well, but can you shed any light on it from the attached photograph? And there is a photograph of what looks like some little white marbles.
Yes, that's a very good description of it. And what you've got there, I had to consult my huge, thick fungi book, and it came out as... it's another one of those dreadful names. It's tapioca slime mould. It has got a Latin name.
I thought it looked like school dinners.
Yeah, exactly that. It's called Briffeldia maxima. There we are. It's often found on grasses and often with legumes at this time of the year, and so it's not particularly common in the UK, but it's not rare either. But there we are. It's more common than usual in this year, in this summer that we're having so far. So that's what you're seeing, and if you go back and have a look now, after 3 or 4 days of the photograph being taken, it goes white and crusty afterwards.
Tapioca pudding.
That brings back memories.
I was more of a rice pudding man.
Well, I was, yes.
With the skin you had to take off the top.
Yes, that's it. Proper rice pudding if you pull the skin off.
Tony says, the other day, Chris, on the grass path next to our home, I came across the discarded body of a small shrew covered in ants. This made me curious for the rest of the day, so I revisited the scene, and to my amazement, after about 8 hours, nothing was left. Bones as well, all gone. The power of ants. Is this normal?
No, that would not be normal. What you saw was completely okay. The ants were feasting on the flesh, the edible parts of the poor mammal that you saw, the deceased mammal, and then later on the body was gone, but that would have been the work of like a carrion crow or a magpie removing it. The ants wouldn't be strong enough, even working en masse as one large ant, if you like, to move it. So they were busy feasting on what they could, when they could, opportunistic feeders are ants, and it's almost certainly even a herring gull would have swallowed it in one go.
Now, Peter in Cossey is a regular for the podcast and talks about some of the wildlife near his home and the foxgloves, 7 foot high. It's certainly been a good year for the foxgloves, hasn't it? But he says normally a lot of these wildflowers would be covered in bees, the bufftails and carders and honeybees mostly. This year it's very different. No bees at all. Any ideas why? And where have they gone?
Yes, they haven't really gone anywhere. Bumblebees will have pretty much finished. Hello, good afternoon. A whole group of school children trudging past the truck with haversacks.
That's bigger than them.
Bigger than them, yes. Yes, and I think teachers coming up the rear. There's a good dozen of them there walking past. Yes. So the bumblebees will have finished the first part of their life cycle. Remember, you won't see them. They don't store honey like honeybees do. They will have a honey pot for use in cold weather, but because the weather's been really inclement over the last month at least, bumblebee activities are low at the moment. So they may come back, and later on in the season you'll start to see them again as they're rearing their queens. But a lot of the workers won't be working and visible at the moment.
Lovely question from Susan Rudling, who emails to say, "Hi Chris, can you tell me what is the oldest tree on the farm?"
Right, the oldest tree on the farm was the Caister Oak. It was Norfolk's Tree of the Year a few years back, and sadly, although it was 635 years old, it was dated by a dendrologist who drilled right through the trunk and managed to count the rings, which were so compressed. I don't know how it was done, and we had people come from all over the country. Sadly, one half fell, and then the same night the other half fell, and it's left a stump which has reshot a little bit. But the good news is it's got hundreds of children all the way round it in an area of successional woodland that was right underneath the tree, and so it will carry, its progeny will carry on. And sadly, although it's more or less deceased, that was the oldest tree on the farm, over 600 years old. No telephones, no cars, no aeroplanes, ploughing probably with oxen. And
that's before Henry VIII, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A real piece of history. And I've made some sort of seats that are situated around the farm at various locations, so you can actually sit on one of Norfolk's oldest trees.
I suppose the wearer of the crown now could be any one of a number, because you've probably got quite a few vying for the title of oldest now.
Yes, there's 250,000 trees there at my farm.
We'll just go and count them.
We will go and see one or two of the giants in next week's podcast, I promise.
And Julian McElroy says, we often put out a trail cam at home, get videos of foxes, a family of them that visit most nights to see if they can get into our chicken run. So far they haven't. Recently we found a small, recently dead fox cub behind where the chickens are. It was attracting a lot of interest from flies. We decided to leave him where he was and let nature recycle the body as we were going away for a few days. A week later, I went to check and there was no sign whatsoever of the cub, no hair, no bones, nothing. What do you think may have happened?
Oh, interesting question. Without proof from one of the trail cameras, which I use as well all over the farm every day, it's likely to have been one of the parent foxes, probably the vixen, and she removed it. And if you watch my terrier, which I do most days, if he finds something, he will take it off into some soft ground, dig a hole with his front feet, still holding whatever it is in his mouth, pops it in the hole, and then buries it with his nose. And I've seen foxes do that time and time again, either as a larder for food for the vixen, but in the case of the dead fox cub, just taking it away and burying it. One of the surprises that you can find out about nature if you watch it like I do.
By the way, Rat is resting this week. He's not with us.
No, I didn't think it was appropriate to take him into the quarries there. One of the quarries is active with lots of diggers driving around, and we've got the mud on our car truck tyres to prove that we've been there.
Now, here's a short clip of a female chaffinch, which has been a constant visitor to the garden of Andrew and Lily, who live in Framlingham, in Suffolk, not far from here. And this chaffinch has a large crusty growth on her foot, which at first we thought was avian pox, but now we're not so sure. She seems well apart from the growth on her leg, and she and her husband have been feeding themselves and taking suet pellets for their young. Please could Chris tell us what he thinks and what her chances for survival may be?
Yes, well, that chaffinch has got... It's an unusual name. It's spelt with a K, but it's Nubocloptic mange, and it's caused by a Trichomonas gallic, another sort of fungal disease that sometimes greenfinches and chaffinches have on their beaks. But in this case, it's a foot one. It's called it's scaly leg disease, and it's called tassel foot. That's the common name for it, where the whole foot becomes like a swollen club of white, sort of. It's really disgusting and very distressing to see. The chaffinch can end up losing its leg or its life as a result. It depends. It's called self-amputation when that happens, and I have seen chaffinches at the farm just with a stump where it kind of amputates at the first joint above the foot. So it's really distressing, quite common, and it is quite infectious. So if you're using bird feeders regularly, you kind of need to sterilise them to stop the little mange mites going across from one bird to another. But out in the wild, of course, you can't carry out any control like that. So very distressing. I did watch the video. Very sad to see.
Hello to Ruth Pye, who said she enjoyed your talk about the dog rose a week or so ago. Ruth says, I remember this as the Alexandra rose. There were charity days when you brought a manufactured one, like poppies in November. They were sold to support Queen Alexandra nurses, and you pinned the rose on your coat like the poppy. Ruth, thank you for that. Yes, Queen Alexandra, that was Edward VII's wife, and she was a great supporter of charities.
Yes, he certainly was, and you're quite right. I didn't know it as the Queen Alexandra Rose. We were actually looking at the dog rose, which is in full flower at this time of the year. The scientific name is Rosa canina. The dog rose has a little bit of perfume, but not much at all. Nevertheless, it's very beautiful.
Okay, Jane, Carl and Kai send us a note. When I say us, Chris, Matthew and Rat.
Yes, Rat.
I hope Rat peruses all these emails. They enjoy the podcast. Our grandson Kai and myself paid a visit a couple of Saturdays ago to High Ash. We saw a kite, a buzzard and a fox in the middle of the field. Kai asked me to ask Chris which bird the nest belongs to, high up in a yew tree on the right-hand side as you go through the gate with High Ash on it, in drawing pins. Oh, that's just at the end of this
right at the end of this track, just in vision.
He counted the trees and said it was the 9th one in.
Yes.
And he thought it may have been buzzards.
He was quite right. Well done, Kai. Congratulations. I've kept it quiet because the buzzards were nesting right across the top of one of the permissive walks here at the farm. It's not a yew tree. It's Sequoia gigantica, and the seed comes from the largest tree in the world, imported into the UK and grown at Surlingham at a little nursery there, and I managed to buy some of the trees, and they're ahead of us at the top end of this track.
And Janet Pape, who lives in Germany, last email for this week, Janet says, A question about our swallows here. Our swallows have had a successful first brood. Their nest was in a corner of a carport, and we enjoyed watching the 4 youngsters making their first attempts at flying. But now the parents are trying to build a new nest on a wooden plank directly above our car. We can move the car, but why don't they use the same nest? This happened last year as well. Should we take away the old nest later on?
No, leave the old nest where it is, and swallows will often use the same nest again, might use it next year. And as we looked at sand martins as well, house martins also suffer the same problem. They're not the only ones occupying the nest. Something called feather lice, I should say, and all sorts of other little insects that live on blood or on feathers on the birds inhabit the nests, and if they build a new nest, they're then exempt from some of those mites and lice that inhabit them. So clever birds, and if you can put something underneath the nest without disturbing the swallows, because they're probably laid and about to incubate the next brood of eggs, if you put something underneath just to keep the car clean, you can carry on using the garage. Just remember to keep the doors open if it's a doored garage 24/7 until they've left. Thank you.
That's it for the emails. Keep them coming though. chris@countrysidepodcast.co.uk. And I guess we're heading off back to the farmyard now. Can I go and have a look at those ducklings again?
Yes, you certainly can. And we'll have to send our apologies to Rat, who's been left in a tractor. He won't mind, but he will know that something's been happening and he's not been part of it. I'll get that sort of terrible look, which makes me feel guilty.
A little sulking going on. Well, at least he's got his toy pheasant to chew on.
Yes, he does have that, and he loves having, we talked about the sand martins having feather games, but he loves the game ball chasing at the end of each day, and he gets a little treat each time he brings it back, and is joyous to watch him.
This is a Soundyard production. Music is by Tom Harris.
Chris, you've got the binoculars out. What have you seen?
We're on the way back to the farm, Matthew, watching the swallows flying over the overwinter wild bird seed mix, and a buzzard came out of a tree, one of the oak trees down this long avenue, and flew out, and then it started going over the crop, just almost hovering just a few feet above the crop, and I suddenly realised it was a red kite. And then, hang on, no forked tail. It was a marsh harrier. I think the motto is I should have gone to Specsavers.
They're not a common sight, are they?
No, not here. And it was hunting over here, looking for presumably the leverets, young hares, rabbits, anything like that.
I think he bothered the swallows because they're back in great numbers now that he's gone.
They're absolutely mocking him. Just or mobbing him, more correctly is the way to phrase it, but he was very intense and hunting into the wind, so he was flying lovely and slowly, using the wind to slow him down so he could actually look down, got the binoculars up, and his head was pointing downwards as he was flying along, not looking where he was going, but absolutely brilliant. One of those special moments. Yet another bird on my raptor list. Marsh harrier, beautiful, beautiful sight, and unmistakable. Once it turned a little bit, I could see under the wings, and that's what it was. Cool, that's a bonus.
Now we've got the swallows to enjoy, and he's gone over the crest somewhere else.
Yep, he'll carry on hunting, scaring the skylarks, frightening the swallows, but looking for dinner.
Hello, it's Anna and Sophie from Soundyard here. Our new service, Spoken Stories, is an incredible experience where we record the stories and voice of your loved one, which you can then hold on to forever.
It makes for an incredible gift, and anyone can make one. Take a listen to this. It beautifully captures the thoughts and feelings of life from a 6-year-old's perspective.
I'm 6 years old and I love running around. I can run very, very fast, but I'm even faster on my bike. That's why I love biking. It makes me feel energetic. And also, I bike loads of places. I like doing sports like dodgeball. The people that are in charge in the world, well, I think that there should be no one in charge at all. So everyone's in charge. So there's no person that's in charge. So everyone is a bit more free. That's what I think. Well, what I try to change at the moment is global warming. It's when us humans litter, destroy the planet and all its nature. That's global warming. It makes me feel sad. And also, if us humans keep doing that, it could destroy the whole planet Earth, and then all of the human beings will be destroyed. I try to stop global warming, and also in my coat pocket I have a bit of Kit Kat litter I found on the floor once. I love the planet more than anything. Grown-ups should be stopping global warming, because grown-ups are more powerful than kids. But if kids can be more powerful than grown-ups, kids and grown-ups can work together and do it. Kids should be able to do the same things as grown-ups. They should have more rights. Well, I love myself because that I believe in a lot of things. That's what I love about myself. I like being a kid, but because when I'm a grown up, I'm gonna have my own kids because that's what I want. And also, I'm a bit worried to have kids, and I'm still gonna be a kid for a long, long time. So I'm glad that's actually gonna happen. I'm glad I'm gonna stay a kid for a long time. I'm gonna have kids because I want to know what it feels like to be a parent. I'm gonna be a good parent.
Isn't that just gorgeous? If you'd like to find out more about recording a spoken story of your own, or you'd like to buy this as a present for someone, take a look at our website, www.soundyard.org/spoken stories, and take advantage of our introductory offer. Alternatively, you can get in touch via email, hello@soundyard.org.
And if the internet isn't an option, you can leave a message with your details on our landline number. It's 01603 273 899, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.